Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the Batman the Animated Series episode, The Clock King. The Clock King served as the introduction of Temple Fugate, aka the Clock King, on the animated series, and it was written by David Weiss and directed by Kevin Altieri. In the episode we meet Temple Fugate, one of the heads of a time and motion study consulting company. The company has been hit by a large fine, and it's up to Fugate to appeal it in court. Fugate is a man obsessed with time and punctuality, never deterring from his strict schedule. One morning on the train to work, Temple strikes up a conversation with Hamilton Hill, a lawyer and frequent fellow passenger. Noticing Fugate's fixation, Hill advises Temple to relax a little and not follow his schedule so obsessively. He tells him to take his lunch break 15 minutes later than usual. After some consideration, Temple does so. However, this accidentally leads to a whole string of unfortunate incidents, which ends with Fugate arriving late to his court appointment. Because of this, Temple's company goes bankrupt. Fugate blames Hill for what happened, as he's the one who advised him to take his lunch later, and it also turns out that Hill worked for the law firm which handled the case. Temple believes the whole thing to be a conspiracy, but of course that isn't the case. It's all random coincidence and bad luck. Nevertheless, Fugate begins a scheme on a revenge plot and returns 7 years later as the Clock King. Using time-themed gimmickry, Temple sets in motion his plan to ruin Hamilton Hill, who's by now become Gotham's mayor, and then kidnap and murder him. As usual, it's up to the Dark Knight to stop the devious plot of this insane rogue. So the thing about the Clock King is, he isn't actually a Batman villain, not in the comics. A lot of people think that he is, and that's certainly understandable. He didn't just appear on the animated series, but also on the 60s TV show, where he was played by Walter Slezak, and naturally the character made some appearances on The Brave and the Bold. I'm not really sure why Clock King has been used so much on Batman shows, because in the comics he's usually shown to be an enemy of Green Arrow. Now, I've never actually read any comics with Clock King whatsoever, so I don't know what he's like in the source material. He's a big villain on TV shows, but he seems to be kind of a B-list rogue in the comics, who rarely appear. I've read some Green Arrow stuff, but nothing that featured him. There's also apparently more than one Clock King. The original is an obscure Golden Age villain, and then there was one who fought the Teen Titans. Being as I haven't read any of this material, I can't compare the portrayal of Clock King from this episode with the one from the comic books, so I'll just tell you what I feel about this particular version of the character. Clock King's motivation is pretty interesting. He's not after some score or to kill Batman, but to get revenge on the guy whom he holds responsible for the misfortunes of his life. Now clearly it isn't actually Hamilton Hill's fault that Fugate missed that court hearing, or well, it kind of is, but accidentally. You can definitely see why Temple hates Hill so much. He made him stray from his regular schedule, something which he never does, and it ended up ruining everything. The one time Fugate went against his own rules, his entire life was destroyed, and all because of that damned Hill. Still, Temple Fugate is obviously insane, and he was that long before getting his life ruined. If you're that obsessed with punctuality and obsessively following a clock, then you're clearly bonkers. Maybe the guy also has some form of mental retardation, because his obsession with the clock kinda reminds me of autism. An autistic person wouldn't devote their entire life to a revenge plot like this though, so my guess is that Temple suffered from a whole bunch of mental issues and conditions. It makes you wonder how he was able to get such a high-ranking job, but he is very intelligent and functions just fine in society, until he snapped of course. Maybe you could argue that he wasn't really crazy before the incident, and just an extreme control freak, but I think his transformation into a supervillain works a lot better if he was already an insane man who was then pushed completely over the edge. Clock King was a great addition to the TAS Rogues Gallery, another mad freak who you could kind of sympathize with, and he had a unique theme. There's plenty of time and clock-themed villains in the DC universe, but oddly enough none in the Bats Rogues Gallery. Temple Fugate filled that gap very nicely, and it's almost a shame he never became a Bat-Rogue in the comics. I mean, Green Arrow never seems to use him anyway, which is strange considering the fact that Ollie has so few villains. Of course, watching the Clock King TAS episodes as a kid, I thought he was a Batman villain, and was surprised to learn that he wasn't many years later. I'm sure several of you had the same experience. I really like the character's visual design here. He's just wearing his usual clothes from before becoming a rogue, but with added clock glasses and a cane shaped as a clock hand. He didn't really need more, as his ordinary outfit was already quite quirky, yet still fitting with the TAS style, so it's not like a guy dressed like that seemed off or anything. This design is very different from the 60s show and the comics, and I definitely like this one the most. The fact that I grew up with this Clock King, and it's still the only version I'm really familiar with, might have something to do with that, but I wonder if I hadn't preferred this look anyway. Clock King was voiced by Alan Rachins, an actor known from various TV roles. He does a great performance here, giving the character a strange sounding voice with an odd speech pattern, almost kinda robotic in a way. This obviously fits perfectly with Temple's personality. He's like a machine more than a human. The voice work isn't necessarily up there with Mark Hamill's or Roddy McDowall's, but it's still great. In conclusion, The Clock King is a great episode that features a really good villain. I don't know if it's a faithful adaptation of the character from the comics, or if it's an improvement or what, but what I do know is that I really like this particular version. Next up on Batman TAS Reviews, we'll be taking a look at the seminal episode, Heart of Ice, so stay tuned for that. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.